And I'll start there with you, Harry. Does this potentially have implications for some of the other investigations, most notably in New York, but also we know as part of this 22-month investigation, Robert Mueller handed off certain segments of this case to other states as well?
Well, it really shouldn't have an impact on those other aspects of the investigation that are going on in other offices. And the reason I say that is because Mueller sort of deliberately concluded with Rod Rosenstein that, for instance, the campaign finance allegations in which Michael Cohen directly accused the president of participating in a crime that Cohen pled guilty to was not part of the scope of what Mueller was doing. So those investigations will continue. And it seems as if arrangements have been made for different U.S. attorneys' offices across the country. The Roger Stone case is being given to the U.S. Attorney in the District of Columbia. Those cases will all continue.
We are obviously seeing the president claiming vindication with this, saying that it's complete and total exoneration. On the collusion front, that may be true in terms of the findings. On the obstruction of justice front, it seems a lot less clear. Is it unusual to you that the special counsel didn't draw a conclusion either way?
The word exoneration seems a little bit of sort of day-is-night-ism from the president, given that even the Barr report quotes Mueller's report. Mueller concluded that this was not meant to be an exoneration. So the president and his associates and lawyers using the word exoneration seems designed to just mislead the public as to the underlying facts of what happened. Even on the Russia issue, some of the language that was used leaves open questions, something like the evidence did not establish that there was a conspiracy or coordination between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. What about people associated with the Russian government? What about conspiracies by non-U.S. people and the Russian government? There's just a lot of open questions, and these can be answered when and if the Mueller report in some substantial form is released. What we got today was not the Mueller report, but sort of a summary of it.
Well, but Mr. Sandick, isn't that sort of standard operating procedure in this kind of investigation? Although a previous guest, Greg Bauer, an hour ago said, well, yeah, but this is a high-profile investigation. Of course they have to let it go. But there was a lot of legal things written about the fact that there was no obligation, really, by Mueller to release this. And beyond that, President Trump has said, go ahead and release it. You think it'll happen?
You know, it's interesting that President Trump said that because his lawyers were very equivocal today about whether it should be released. They sort of said it's up to the Department of Justice. Barr, in his letter, describes a process to review and redact the Mueller report, which seems appropriate, but doesn't give any timetable, doesn't indicate that there's any real urgency for that to be done. And so while you're absolutely right, special counsel guidelines that were promulgated in the late 90s don't require a public report in the same way that the independent counsel guidelines did for Ken Starr and Lawrence Walsh in the past. You know, Congress needs to have some either summary from Mueller himself provided, along with enough underlying documents to make an assessment of what it needs to do, or it has to conduct its own investigation. So those are the two choices. It can't be the case that they get a 4-page summary from a political appointee who says nothing to see here, and then they just pack it up and go home. That would seem to be insufficient if I were a member of Congress.
So is there any limit on then what kind of investigations we'll see, because actually it was decided that there was no collusion with the Russians by the Trump team. But then you mentioned all these other kind of conditions. Is that what we're kind of going to see here? Endless things that haven't been investigated to just keep going till we find something that the president can be found guilty of?
No, I don't think that that's going to happen. But I do think what will happen is that there needs to be a public airing of the underlying issues. There was, even according to Barr, a conclusion that the Russian government successfully interfered with the U.S. election by hacking into U.S. email accounts. The president personally continues to deny that any of that happened, continues to say that there was collusion between his opponent in the 2016 election and Russia, continues to say these things. They're just totally contradicted by the facts. I think it's fair for Congress to say we can't just take a summary from a political appointee. We need to actually see what happened. And it doesn't mean that it has to lead to any charges against anyone. It may well be that charges aren't appropriate, but Congress has an oversight role that goes beyond the question of whether there's evidence of something proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That standard's very high. Prosecutors are appropriately cautious before charging people. But in our ordinary lives, we don't make all decisions based on proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And voters and people in Congress should know what actually happened, should know the underlying facts of the investigation.